Hey everybody, welcome to my Necromancer Boss Guide for Darkest Dungeon. This is a series for beginners at the game, so if you've played this, for 100 hours and you've got a ton of different strategies, this might not be the optimal way, but it's a good starting place. Necromancer is the boss of the ruins, which is probably the dungeon that you visited the most, as it was the first one that was unlocked. It's definitely one of the simpler dungeons. You're really only dealing with bleed and stress, and you probably played this dungeon the most out of all of them, which means that you'll unlock your first boss here. And it's not one of the hardest boss fights in the game, it's probably one of the simpler ones, but you do need a team composition that can take him down. Let's cover the Necromancer and his moves before we move on to team composition.
I brought my colleagues back with much of their intellect intact. A remarkable triumph for even the most experienced necromancer.
The Necromancer is a normal-sized enemy, he's eldritch and unholy, and he's pretty resistant to stun, but he's weak to bleed, blight, and movement attacks, which means that you can pretty much use most of the moves in the game, and it'll be effective against him. So, he has 3 moves, all of which spawn a skeleton and move him back 1 space, so it's definitely important to kill the skeletons as soon as possible, hopefully in the same move that he spawns them, if you're able to. It's definitely more important to focus on killing his minions before you move on to doing actual damage to him, because it can be very easy for you to get overwhelmed by his minions. So let's go into his actual moves. His first move is called The Flesh is Willing. On the apprentice level fight, it can do up to 8 damage. It's definitely his most debilitating attack, as it usually crits somebody in the first row, which means it's going to cause stress as well and likely do about half of your hero's HP. The second move is called The Crawling Dead. It's basically the same attack, just on the back row, and it does a little bit less damage. This is a move that you basically want him to be using, as it's probably the least annoying. As for his final move, it's called 6 Feet Under. Targets the entire party, does 15 stress damage on the apprentice level fight. Very annoying if you didn't camp before the fight and reduce your stress levels. So make sure you do that. The Inspiring Speech skill is pretty good if you have it on the Crusader, as it'll, heal stress damage and also prevent further stress damage. Definitely avoid taking trinkets like the head trinkets that increase the amount of stress that you take, because that'll lead to you getting a lot of afflicted heroes like I did in some of the gameplay here. That definitely makes the fight a lot harder. Alright, so let's get into the team composition.
Women and men, soldiers and outlaws, fools and corpses.
So, it can be confusing, definitely, if you're first starting at the game, working on your team composition. You've got position, skills, trinkets, and hero choice that all go into that. We're going to be choosing these 4 heroes: the Crusader, the Houndmaster, the Occultist, and the Arbalist. This is what's known as a mark party. Some of the moves that the heroes have do up to double damage, or more, actually, on marked enemies. In general, it's important to keep the Necromancer marked and kill the skeletons as soon as they're spawned. If you're doing that every turn, then you should be fine. So, as for the heroes, the Crusader, that's the first one in the frontline position. It's one of the first heroes you get. It's the best melee hero for the ruins, in my opinion, because Smite, his normal attack, and Holy Lance both do 15% extra against unholy enemies, which is, skeletons, most of the enemies in the ruins itself, including the Necromancer. The Necromancer is not a skeleton, that's important to know. So, in this fight, he'll be focusing on killing the skeletons as soon as possible. Hopefully every turn, if you're doing it right and take the right trinkets. At one point I did have the Hellion in the front, but I found that she wasn't doing enough damage on the front 2 enemies, not killing them every turn. She does have Iron Swan, which is good for hitting the Necromancer, but honestly, with the other 3 heroes focusing on the Necromancer, you should be fine with one character being dedicated to the skeletons. So, the skills that you're going to be running on the Crusader are Smite, Zealous Accusation, Stunning Blow, Inspiring Cry, or Holy Lance. I would say Holy Lance is probably more useful in the harder fights, in the upper levels past Apprentice, because there are some enemies that knock you back. It might be nice for the Crusader to be able to attack while he's moving up. But I would say for the Apprentice level fight, probably Inspiring Cry, just in case you need that extra stress heal. Trinkets aren't especially crucial for this fight, but it would be good to have the Swordsman Crest trinket because it'll do extra melee damage and won't really affect your Inspiring Cry very much. Anything that does damage to the Unholy is also good. On the Apprentice level of the fight, you're really only going to be having to deal with the Bone Soldier and the Bone Rabble, both of which are pretty easy, have low HP, should be able to kill them in one hit. But in the harder levels, you'll be having tankier skeletons getting spawned, which means you may not be able to kill it in one hit, but hopefully so. If not, you can go for the stun if you think you need it. Otherwise, I would just go for the smite in order to secure the Zealous Accusation for the next turn. Honestly, the Crusader shouldn't be very difficult. You just hit a skeleton every turn, should be fine. Next up is the Houndmaster. He does really strong mark damage, that's why he's on this team for the most part. The skills we're going to be choosing are the Hound's Rush, Targeting Whistle, Lick Wounds, and Blackjack. If the Occultist is healing when you need to mark the Necromancer, you can use Targeting Whistle on the Houndmaster's turn to secure that so that you don't lose the mark. Houndmaster is pretty much self-sufficient, with the Lick Wounds being a very strong self-heal, which is also good to free up the Occultist, just in case he needs to heal anybody else. The trinkets that you want to equip to him are survivability stuff, such as dodge trinkets, HP, protection, all of that is good. The Blackjack skill is especially useful before the boss, but it's also good as a backup during the fight if you want to stun somebody. Hound's Rush does great mark damage, especially once you level it up. It gains like 10% damage on mark targets per level up, so definitely make sure you upgrade that in the guild. It also does bleed on the Necromancer since he's not a skeleton, technically, and that about does it. So the next hero is the Occultist. He's not going to be doing very much, at least if you're doing it right, other than marking and healing. The skills that we're equipping are Abyssal Artillery, Word Reconstruction, or Weird, I'm not sure, Vulnerability Hex, and finally Daemon's Pull. So the trinkets you want to be equipping on this guy are Healing or Eldritch trinkets. Obviously healing is good, more healing is better. Eldritch trinkets are good in case you want to do some damage with Abyssal Artillery when the Necromancer's in the back row. He has a lot of trinkets that are class specific that are useful for that. Word Reconstruction is your main healing source for this fight, but it's kind of weak specifically because the Necromancer is going to be hitting 2 people at once and you can only heal with 1 person with Word Reconstruction. Healing is more important than marking, with the Occultist especially, because you can mark with the 2 other heroes, the Houndmaster and the Arbalest, while the Occultist focuses on healing. Daemon's Pull is not very good, but it does allow you to pull the Necro into the first row. Not that you should be really having to deal with that much, since the Crusader should be killing the skeletons instead of hitting the Necromancer. But it's good for versatility just before the fight. Finally, we've got the Arbalest. The Arbalest does great mark damage and has a high crit chance on marked enemies. She can mark herself, and she also has some healing that's pretty good, just in case you need to get someone off death's door. The 4 skills that we're equipping are Sniper Shot, Battlefield Bandage, Bola, and Mark Target. The reason we're choosing Bola is that it can hit the front 2 enemies, which is good, especially for securing those Zealous Accusation kills, just in case the Crusader is a few points off. Overall, the accuracy, damage, and health is pretty good for the Arbalest. If the Houndmaster is healing and the Occultist is healing somebody else, the Arbalest can mark target. That way you should have a mark at all times, no matter what. The only thing is that she's unable to heal herself, so that's important to note. She can only heal the first 3. So just to recap, let's go over, the overall strategy. Crusader kills the skeletons as soon as they spawn. Occultist should be marking and healing at all times, unless the Necromancer misses, and then you can go for an Abyssal Artillery. Houndmaster is going to be hitting and stacking up that bleed, and also self-healing or marking. Arbalest is doing damage, marking, and healing. So basically, everybody except for the Crusader is a very versatile class and can fill in for other roles if it needs to. Alright, so that's about it. That's the end of my Necromancer Boss Guide for Darkest Dungeon. Make sure to comment down below. Let me know what kind of videos you want to be seeing soon. I should have a stress management guide coming up soon, as I know that's one of the hardest parts of learning this game, for sure. But other than that, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.
Towering, fierce, terrible, nightmare-made material. A dizzying blow to body and brain.
obliterated.
Check his pulse, Yugi.
Continue to actuate them. Will these walking bones finally